Hold on. 1 minute. And welcome. I'm Jeff Fleming. I'm director of the Des Moines Arts Centers. Our great pleasure to have you here. It's a very, very exciting night. We are very fortunate to have the internationally acclaimed contemporary artist El Anatsui with us this evening. He traveled from Nigeria to be with us tonight in conjunction with the opening of his show on Thursday night. The show is entitled Gravity and Grace. So thank you all for coming, and thank you, El. El, your work is intriguing, it's layered, it's filled with great beauty, symbolic meaning, and content, and it poetically speaks of transformation through improvisation and invention. So we're looking forward to hearing what your response to your work is and your work in the field. So we'll ask your first question, the title of your exhibition, Gravity and Grace. Can you tell us about that title and what it means to you?
Well, I don't know what gravity and grace means to me, but let me go a little bit into history to see whether we can get something out of it. I grew up in a mission house, so I had my environment was school and church, and the two of them kind of sequestered me from my culture, because these are all Western institutions. I was born in Ghana, grew up, schooled in Ghana, did everything in Ghana. And growing up in the mission house meant that I had very little contact with my own culture. Yeah, because we were forbidden to behave like us, but to behave like the church and the school models that we were taught. And after growing up in the mission school, I finally went to high school and then to the university. And in the university, my art school was affiliated to the Goldsmith College in London. So the estrangement kind of continued. Art is something which I think should originate from one's own self and therefore one's own culture. But here was I being exposed to Western art, fully, and the situation was such that you had a feeling that there wasn't anything like art in Africa, until later in the course, maybe about the penultimate year of the course, a couple of us decided to search for anything African that is an art heritage. And I discovered one which was a system of signs and symbols, and each sign would have a meaning, and you take a look at them and they were like attempts to give form to very abstract concepts, like unity, like oneness of God, and so on and so forth. Versatility, Now, before this discovery, we had just finished doing European Renaissance art, in which, verisimilitude was the order of the day, and here was I looking at art which was attempting to give form to intangible things as against a renaissance where everything was reduced to a human form. Even when they want to handle abstract concepts, they would give a human form to it, such things. And so it was very intriguing and interesting to me, and that was the beginning of my kind of discovering my own roots in art. And this has stayed with me right from that time until now. I have a special interest in working with the abstract, and the intangible concepts or ideas, Now, many years ago, I read a book entitled Gravity and Grace. I think it was written by a young French philosopher. If I can remember the name, Simone Weil. Simone Weil is the name. Yeah, well, I can't remember most of the things that she wrote about, but the fact that she was engaging with abstract concepts, made it very endearing to me. And so I did a work which I eventually thought was my attempt to grapple with the form of gravity and the form of grace. So gravity and grace came about as a result of that.
Wonderful. Personally, I'm especially interested in the power of materials and the power of cultural objects to tell a story or to relay information about a culture or a period of time or a way of seeing the world. Objects, no matter their monetary value or their grandness, have ability to tell us a story. People have touched and used the materials that you use in your work. Can you talk about your materials and the relationship of the history of their use? How people have touched them and used them?
Yeah. I've worked with several media. Clay was one of them, wood, one of them, and now metal. And clay is the earth, and we are all in touch with the earth all the time. So there was not much problem with that. But with wood, I'd worked with wood that was processed straight from the factory, and working with that wasn't very exciting to me until I hit the idea of working with wood that has been subjected to human use. So I would go around collecting wooden objects that people have used, and the commonest one that I used was the mortar. I've worked with doors and windows and chairs and such things, because to me these kind of things come with their own history. They are loaded with a lot of story and history, and the fact that humans have used them lends them a special dimension, a kind of spiritual dimension, because I feel that when humans touch something, when we as humans touch something, we leave a charge, we leave a current, we leave, something, on that. And if, as an artist, I work with media which have such qualities, I feel more satisfied, the current or the power or the energy of the people, who have touched those things, it seems to me resides in the works. That's how I came about working with the bottle caps, for instance, which are objects that certainly before you can use the bottle and its contents, you have to touch and open the caps. So it's been subjected to a lot of human use,
Indeed. I also believe that art is transformative, that art is magical. Do you work from that belief as well?
Yeah, art could be magical, but I don't think all the time. It's
Tell
not
me
all
when
the
it
time.
is and when it's not.
Um, Let me give an example. I was on a project on the North Sea coast of Germany many years back, and I did a piece which used the earth. We gathered, we got an earth-moving equipment and built a very huge hill on the sea coast. You know, the North Sea coast is very flat, and I decided to build this hill to break the monotony of the horizontal line. And then did a little pot and put on top of it. And I called it the altar, you know. Eventually, we used it for a performance, you know. Now, when we went for this project, it was promised us that we should not come with any ideas. We should just come and experience the weather and let it get us going, you know. And we went there. There was a lot of wind. They promised there would be lots of rain. And the wind was there, all right. Rain was not there for, out of the 4 weeks that we were there, for about 2.5 weeks, there was no rain. And a lot of people who came, well, we were 10, about 3 or 4 people did works which they needed rain to finish. You know, I remember somebody did rain clothes, you know, clothes that were sewn with a lot of pockets. The idea being that when it rains, you go into the rain, especially the eaves of buildings, and then all the pockets will be filled with water, you know. And somebody did something which was on the slopes of the dikes into the sea. Placed bags of dye, different colors of dye, you know. The idea being that when rain comes, then the dyes will stream different colors into the sea. They're brilliant ideas, and we're all waiting to see these ones, and the rains weren't coming. And when we did a performance, we called it the offering to the weather. As soon as we finished the performance, the rain started coming. The rain started falling right there. And there was a woman who used to come to the beach every time, you know, and she would come to the hill to sit around or play around. And after this performance, she came to me and told me this story, that this thing makes her remember a tray, which was a family heirloom, that was given to them, and they were to use it to put out fires, wildfires. When you see wildfire, you carry this tray, run against the wind, and the fire will go off. And she said, my performance reminded her of it, and especially the pot that was up on the hill. But that they lost their tray in the Second World War. You know, that's an example of how art can be magical and can serve as a link between people.
Oh, that was a wonderful merger into my next question. Your work often raises questions about cross-cultural exchange, perhaps between Africa and Europe and the Americas. Can you talk about this cultural exchange, particularly in your use of the liquor bottle caps, the economies and how they've connected Europe and Africa and the Americas, particularly perhaps in the slave trade, where rum was used as a monetary value to buy and sell slaves?
Well, I've talked about it in so many fora, and I don't know whether there's anything new about it again, you know. And you've already mentioned it, you know, that when Europe came initially to Africa, to kind of relate to the place. They came as traders, and the objects that they brought, prominent among them were things like rum, salt, and some other things, mirror, and and these were exchanged for almost everything. And eventually, it included humans as well, So slaves were bought with a couple of bottles of gin or rum or something, and then they are brought to the Americas, and then they work on the plantations to produce more sugar cane for more rum and gin, and which was sent back into Europe and then back into Africa, and so that drink made the rounds on the transatlantic route. It was in all the legs of this thing. So that drink kind of served as it's a kind of link factor, between the three continents, Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Yeah.
Do you see your work as being political?
Well, I don't know how one defines politics, but if you think about it as trying to take advantage of people, then no, but my work doesn't take advantage of anybody.
No? Do you see your work as autobiographical?
There have been a couple of works that I did which I would say have biographical, undertones. Yeah, there is one that I did entitled Baby. Now, this is work I did as a student. I did it immediately after an uncle who told me about my life history, and how, as a baby, I lost my mom and grew up with a foster mother who I thought was my biological mother. And well, when I was about 14 or so in high school, he suspected that I didn't know my real circumstances, and he called me one day and told me about it. And when he died, and I went to the funeral, came back, I was in art school, I did this piece, which I called Baby, in which I did a baby's head and in terracotta, in clay, and scooped everything out of it, removed the eyes as well, and that was meant to kind of throw the question as to where human memory lies. Is it in the eyes or in the brain, or So I think that's about the only one I remember clearly, which is autobiographical. There could be other ones which if I go through my list, could be autobiographical, but this one is the clearest one that I remember. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Your work resists categorization. They're not paintings, they're not, possibly not sculpture. I'm interested with this in mind, your relationship to, at least in the West, the notion of craft and craftsmanship. Your work is laborious, it's made by the actions of the hand. Do you see a connection with traditional craft, whether it be African craft or Western craft, that notion of craft and the handmade? Is that important to you?
Well, if you remember at the beginning, I said that I grew up not in touch with my own culture. Now, in my language, we have the same word for the two activities that in Western language they would have two distinct words for. They were kind of, they coalesce into one word, but I didn't know about that. I grew up with the Western idea of art this way and craft this way, you know. And it was later on, during my professional growth, that I discovered that there is actually no distinction between the two, and that is my stand right now.
That there
I
is
don't
a
have a
distinction
distinction. I
between
don't have a distinction between craft and art.
Good, I agree with you. You referred to your hangings as walls in the past, and you've even stated that walls reveal more than they hide. Can you elaborate on that statement?
Yeah. A couple of the pieces are actually carry the title of wall. And they focus on this aspect of wall as something which to me reveals more than it hides, because the idea of a wall is to hide, but then when a wall shows up in the way, it only occludes your retinal view and not the mental one. In other words, your imagination can go over the wall, or does go over the wall, to imagine what is there behind it. And most times it is richer, what the imagination thinks about as behind the wall is richer, in which case you've been made to, the wall has revealed more things to you, whether they are there or not. It's not the issue, but it has revealed more things to you than it has actually hidden by its physical presence. So that's what that is about.
You do something that I have never known another artist to do, and that is that you allow, and I know you've addressed this question many times, but if you'll talk to us a little bit about it, you allow the installers at a museum or a gallery to contribute to the installation and to the way the final work is presented to the public. And that is something I've never known an artist to do. And so you give other people a freedom to participate, in essence, in the creative process. Can you talk about that process in your mind and why you give that freedom to others?
Yeah, because I think others are not dumb. They also have feelings. What I think I do is that as an artist, I create data. I create data for people to use to, express themselves. Or, yeah, kind of. So in a sense, it works around my works, actually. They are works that people do from time to time. You asked an earlier question whether I was political. I think that is partially an answer to it as well. I'm not a political person. I don't want to take advantage of people, but I believe that in every human being there is the creative person. In most of us, it is asleep, but if it gets a challenge, it can rise up to it. You never can know. So I prefer to let my works be challenges to people who install them. They have something to say, and in the process, I go around and I see very interesting takes that different installers bring to the pieces, and it makes me also learn more about what I've done. So it's made it to be a two-way thing, which I think is very rewarding to me.
And does that also go to your studio process? And you obviously have a large studio with assistants, and you share that creative process with your assistants as well. Can you talk a little bit about how a work is made, the process for its creation?
Yeah, the work is made by so many assistants, because it's a very, very laborious, tedious, laborious, repetitive undertaking, and you couldn't have one person doing it, so it has to be so many people. The first one I did, I think it was done by me and an assistant, and it took so many months, if not years, to get finished. But after that, I got to know that there's need for more hands so that you can realize the work in a shorter time. What I do is work out a pattern or a weave. You can call it a weave because they look like textiles. They're not textile, but they look like that. I work out a weave or a format, and then I teach the assistants to work with it. Now, in course of time, I discovered that there could be so many weaves, and each of them giving so many different effects. It's like somebody painting with watercolor or oil color or this thing. You see, there's so many effects that you can get with the medium. The same effects you can get, or more, with even more with these bottle caps, for instance. As time went on, we kept discovering, and so we keep doing different, creating different effects, and storing them. And on a good day, you can get up and say, okay, I want this. We do them into little blocks, You can say, I want this one which is opaque. I want this one which is translucent. I want this one which is black. Put them together and let's see. And, so it's also, well, I direct it, but it's also something which other people have a lot of contribution to make to, my assistants. The assistants have a lot of contribution to make too. And occasionally, too, I do ask them what they feel about what they are looking at, and they do come in with criticism and other things. They can say, oh, it looks too beautiful,
You started to say
beautiful. Let me remember one which one of them said recently. I said there is too much beauty. Yes, he said there is too much beauty. In other words, it's too busy. Yeah, and I agreed with him because the work was really busy. They didn't seem to have a specific focus. So, that way you are kind of, even if I was a politician, if my work is politician, then my political orientation is Democrat. Mm-hmm. Because what I do is democratic. Yeah.
That's perfect. That's perfect. You have been making art for many, many years, making extraordinary art in a variety of materials and formats. But the larger international world really became aware of your work at the 2007 Venice Biennale, where you had a magnificent piece hanging over the Grand Canal, as well as the Arsenale. Do you consider that a breakthrough for your work, and what did that experience mean to you?
Well, I think that experience means a lot to me. And number one, it was the first time that I've been to Venice. That was the second time. I've been to Venice earlier on in 1990. But that was done at very, very short notice. When the invitation came, there was only 2 months left for the Biennale to start. And so we have very little time to really do anything worth, you got to produce some new work, that will address certain standard or issues or, And we didn't have that time. And this was first time that Africa was being represented. Well, Egypt has their own permanent pavilion, but this is the first time Africa south of the Sahara, the desert, was being represented at Venice Biennale. Five of us were there. And, so we were looked at as African artists. When in 2007, I was invited in my own right as an artist, not necessarily African or European or whatever, And so it meant a lot to me in that light. And the fact that I had a whole year or more to prepare, gave me ample time to work on this thing. I was given 2 spaces in the Arsenale, 2 walls facing each other. So I decided to do 2 pieces that kind of would be in conversation with each other. 1 male and 1 female. So the first wall had the female, the one with female elements, of the bottle cap, medium, on it. And then the second one had the one with male elements of the bottle caps on. So that was how it happened. And then the one on the Grand Canal, was commissioned by a private art entrepreneur who was holding an exhibition at that time entitled, something to do with time and art, and so the piece I created, I entitled Fresh and Fading Memories, in which I draped the front of the palazzo where his exhibition was situated with this piece. And the creation process started from the studio, but got finished at the venue there. When I draped the frontage, then I now went onto the work and created holes on it so that it looked like age was brought into, you could, the holes were to kind of allow views of the very ancient palazzo on which the work was to come in, So here is something created new, and here is the old 8th century old walls of this thing peeping through, So that idea of time and art, we're trying to play with it in that particular work.
And you've shown your work all over the world. Do you believe audiences in Europe, in Asia, America, or Africa respond to your work differently? Or is there a universal response to your work?
I wish I had researched this. Well, I haven't gone around to see how people respond to, but I think the response is about equal in the 2 places. There's enthusiastic response, but if you talk about whether people understand, well, not that there's any particular thing that one should understand, but then the ones that I can talk about are writings, people who write about the work. I've exhibited in Africa, and people have written about them there. And then I've exhibited in the West, and people have written about it here. And I see that there is, yes, a little bit of difference. In the West, most of it we're wondering about who this fellow is, and the people who wrote about my works in Africa are not into that. That's about the only difference I see. But as far as enthusiasm, or I'm not going to talk about understanding, but enthusiasm is concerned, they are about the same.
Now, you've taught for many, many years and have recently retired. Do you miss teaching?
Well, if you mean formal teaching, yeah, initially I thought I missed it, but but after some time, I see that I'm still teaching. Yeah, because in the studio, it was still a kind of a teacher, and also I'm teaching myself how to live with my own time, As a formal teacher, you had a timetable drawn up for you, and you have to do this at this time. Now you have the time to yourself. How do you use it? How do you manage it? And so I'm teaching myself how to do that. So I'm still teaching.
Yes, you're teaching all of us. Yes. So what's next? What are your goals? What do you want to tell us?
Well, I don't think that I have any new place going. But I remember that in a Sunday school, the teacher asked the students why we always pray God to give us this day our daily bread. And there are so many answers, but none was as effective as one of that a small girl gave. Say we ask for daily bread so that we are sure it is fresh. Now, as an artist, I think artists have it as a mission, or is it a calling or whatever, to make life fresh. And I think that's what I'm going to continue to do.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I'm sure the audience would like to have some questions as well, if you don't mind, Elle. Are there questions from the audience that you would like of Elle? Mary?
I would like to follow up on the question you had about how the Western audiences and other audiences react to that, about how people write about you. And you said, well, the Westerners want to know who this guy is. What do the African or Europeans look at? Well, not the Europeans because they're Western, but what is the African?
Just, Jeff, can you repeat that question? And then I'm going to ask the audience to please wait for the microphone to be passed to you until the question can be heard. So, Mary, I can either give it to you now and you can restate it. I couldn't hear you.
I just wanted to follow up on the question about how people respond to your art. And you mentioned that Westerners are often interested in who you are. How do the Africans respond? What is their response? What do they look at?
Oh, they are able to connect the work with the environment and situations. They are, they are not focused on me, but they are focused on the work and what it is saying. But in the West, they all most of the times would want to know where it is coming from, and
Other
Anyone else, please raise your hand so we can get a mic passed to you. I see Lenore up here. And then, Michael, I see another hand up in the back. Well, after Lenore.
I really enjoyed hearing you talk, and your speaking brought out something that I thought I was seeing in the work, which is a lot of, there's a sense of humor about it. There's a sense of play that seems really evident in your work through the use of materials and colors. Can you talk a little bit about that? Did you select these materials because they have a profound significance, like you were talking about the slave trade and so on? They have allusions to a much more dire history, but they also have a presence of being quite joyous right now.
She's asking, is there humor and joy in your work?
Well, I'm happy to hear that. I didn't think that my work had a lot of joy. Well, I don't know how to explain it, but maybe it has something to do with the fact that these things carry these feelings with them. Things used by humans, humans therefore are able to easily relate to them. Maybe that's the reason, I'm not into trying to find reasons for, but.
No, I was just responding to the tactile, the feeling of it and the color of it, and the size of it has such a feeling for the audience, or for me, of a kind of energy and exuberant, that's what I was responding to. So I just wondered about it.
Yeah.
Maybe
It's a good thing, Al.
Maybe maybe it's just in my eyes. Thank you.
Mike has a question.
Hi. So my question is regarding, you mentioned with your formal education, I think it was at the university in Kumasi, that there was kind of a shortcoming in terms of education of African art. And so I just wondered, in terms of your personal exploration of African art, is there a particular art tradition or cultural tradition in Africa that really, stuck with you or resonated with you and you've weaved throughout your art since then?
Is there a tradition in African art that you've specifically responded to in your studies as well as your work?
Well, my beginning point was the collection of signs that I discovered in the National Cultural Center, which happens to be in Kumasi, the same town that the university was located. With hindsight, I was wondering why the university didn't take, or the art school didn't take advantage of that cultural center too. Because that would have kind of given us some more rounded view of art, So these are the body of signs that I worked with them for about 5-6 years, and I still do make reference to them in my works at times, These are signs trying to grapple with or give form to intangible, concepts or ideas, Yeah, that's about what I took from my cultural heritage.
Sorry, just a quick, and then the titles of your pieces, like Glee, for example, is that Ewe? What's the language?
Your titles of your work, for example, one is entitled Glee, and she
What's
was
the
asking the
language?
source for that particular title. Might it have an African source or
that's
Western source?
that's from my language. Glee is from a language and it means wall. Yeah, most of the times my language has this. I would call it facility that it is highly tonal, but when they write it, they don't put any tone marks. So you see a word, same spelling, same everything, but with different tonal inflections. It could be meaning many different things, you know. And since I've worked with forms, or I work with forms which don't have any particular or fixed format, you know, I like most of the times titling my works in that language so that they also have the flexibility of meaning, you know, as well.
Oh, there's a question there, I'm sorry.
So your work has lots of, I think people will see a lot of interesting connections between your work and the other work in the galleries upstairs, some painting, some sculpture. Are there some other artists whose work that you really admire, or painters or sculptors that were an influence on you?
And they're artists.
Other artists that you admire and that might have had an influence on your work, whether they're painters or sculptors?
Well, as an artist, I don't want to maybe copy other artists, but I certainly admire artists, you know, but not with the aim of working like them, you know.
You don't have any favorites?
Do you have any favorite artists?
Oh, several. I've named them in several fora. So
Okay, we're going to go to Betty, and then we'll go to Michael.
I'm wondering if going to a mission school you feel had any negative impact on your early aesthetic development?
Going to a missionary school, did it have a negative impact on your artistic development?
Initially, I thought it had a negative impact, but I think it rather was the other way, because if you are kept away from something for a long time and you now have the need for it, the hunger, you know, is greater. You know, if you've been sequestered for a long time and you now need it, the hunger will be very, very great. So I think the fact that I was kept away from my culture for a long time made me look for it in a more intense way, you know, than, because my colleagues who grew up in it, you know, I don't think thought that there was anything to search for about it. You know, so in that sense, I think it was a positive thing.
Yes.
Right here. So thinking about making your artwork individually and then with a team with lots of assistance, retrospectively, would you be able to give us an understanding of which process gave you more fulfillment? If making the baby when you were younger or now working with lots of assistants, which gave you more personal fulfillment?
I think
Which do you find more fulfilling, working as an individual artist or working with
okay.
a studio?
Yeah, well, I have to apologize. I have some challenge with hearing, that's why. I've worked on my own and then started with one assistant, then two assistants, and now about 20, 30 assistants. And in the beginning, I was a purist. I was one of the people who thought that the artist should be the one who not only imagines the work, but gives it form, you know. But as I grew out of this, you know, and I now know that the artist, job is more like generating ideas. You know, you generate ideas, then you can get people to work on, to realize the ideas. Yeah, so I find it more interesting at this stage now that I have many assistants because it makes it easier for me to now concentrate on the nitty-gritty of it, and that is finding the new idea, and then they would work on it. And it's very convenient in the sense that you can travel and your studio is at work. You know, yeah, because you have generated enough idea or enough, you generate enough for them to work on. So you go and you have a realization of what you had imagined ready for you to either confirm or edit, or, you know, it's more convenient. And I don't think it's a new model. It's a model which is as old as man, or when man started, say, building, for instance. Architecture is not about the architect drawing and then the architect going to realize the work. You know, he limits himself to the design and then leaves the realization to other teams. You know, so it's not an old model, a new model at all. It's old, and it's very, I recommend it to any artist.
We have time for one more question.
So I'm noticing your innovative use of materials, and as an artist, I'm curious, how important is pushing the boundaries or the limitations of your material? Does that play an important role in your creativity?
How important is pushing the boundaries of your materials? Pushing your materials as far as
Oh,
they
yeah.
go.
Very, very important. It's very important. You know, when I worked with the first set of bottle caps, I took a look at it and said, this is going to be limited. It's going to be a short run. It's going to be like 1 or 2 pieces. But as I kept working with them, you know, and it's important that you don't just leave things to people to do all the time, but you have to also get involved in it. As I got involved in it, I kept discovering more formats and textures, and you know, and now I have quite a repertoire of textures, formats, you know, that I can work with, and therefore it gives me the pleasure to really work with it. Otherwise, then I would have stopped working with this medium and looked for something else. You know, it hasn't run its course yet, and it still has a lot to offer. Yeah.
Indeed.
Jeff, we can take 2 more. I saw 2 hands, so Muriel, I know you were fun.
All right, all right.
And somebody who you're going, and Larissa, so we're going to go 2 on that side.
Okay.
Please use the microphone.
When you were talking about the pieces that faced one another in Venice, that one was male and one was female, and that you found bottle caps that were female and male to talk to each other, I was wondering if you could talk about that, because I'm curious if the pieces start from a concept or if they're starting out of the materials.
Do you start with an idea, or do you start with the materials? For example, in Venice, you had a male and female facing each other. Did that come from the materials, or did you have that concept first?
Yeah, I had already worked with the material for some time, and so I knew them. I knew the material. I knew what it was capable of. So that in this instant, most of the times I'll let the material lead me on. But this time, I let the idea of male, female start the whole work. Yeah, so this is one instance where I started in the other way around, you know, with the idea of two communicating or conversing pieces, male, female, yeah, and then I knew clearly what the female elements are in the bottle caps and what the male elements are in the bottle cap, and proceeded to work with them.
There's one more, I believe.
My question, I'm very fascinated with your idea about touch and how your materials are things that have been touched by humans, and then your installers and your creators are touching the materials. My question is, the people who are viewing your art, how do you feel about them touching the art?
Well,
Think
that's
carefully.
that's very easy for me to answer. I'm not a museum person. So yes, I would want them to touch it.
Don't tell them that.
Museum.
He really didn't say that. No. That's not a very good question.
Oh, not a good answer.
Well, we are very, very fortunate certainly to have you here tonight, and certainly to have Elle with us. It is a treat for all of us and for this community, and we're so enthusiastic and excited about your exhibition, which opens on Thursday night. Please come. So thank you again, Elle, for coming and for being with us tonight, and thank you as well.